with way too much time on their hands. And wouldn't you know it, my hands are covered in time right now. So enter Dragon Ball Super. Whether you love it or hate it, this little series has jammed itself full of obscure and some not so obscure references to its parent show Dragon Ball Z, as well as the occasional pop culture reference or two. What's that? Don't believe me? Well, you're in luck, because today I'm bringing you the 15 best Dragon Ball Super Easter eggs. Number 15. Dragon Ball's walking punchline, otherwise known as Yamcha, since his cremation at the hands of a Cyberman in the late 80s, has, thanks to the internet, reached maximum meme capacity. You can even get a freaking statue of his death. Clearly, Toei was in on the joke too, because in episode 70 of Dragon Ball Super, otherwise known as the baseball episode, Yamcha finds himself completely physically mismatched with the likes of Vegeta on the opposite team. Filled with nods to Dr. Slump, it's clear to see that this episode is purely a gift for the fans. The episode reaches a satisfying climax with Yamcha assuming his most famous pose, a cheeky nod to any longtime fans of the series. Only this time, instead of it resulting in his death, he reaches home base, winning the game for his team. Fantastic moment, and awesome to see Yamcha finally get a win. Go Yamcha! Number 14. I don't particularly like to talk about a kid looking for tail often, or at all really, but episode 88 of Dragon Ball Super made me do just that. Thinking back to the Saiyan saga of Dragon Ball Z, many fans will remember Kid Gohan chasing a certain dinosaur, hoping to slice off a portion of its tail to cook for dinner. Fast forward to Dragon Ball Super, as Piccolo and Gohan train in preparation for the Tournament of Power, they decide to spend some time together in a very nostalgic, familiar setting. I just hope it wasn't the same dinosaur, poor thing hardly had any tail as it was. Number 13. This one I almost missed entirely. It goes by quite fast. Sticking with the same arc, we land on episode 76 as Goku and Krillin take on an army of villainous illusions in a forest with just the most inviting name, backed into a corner by an imposing illusion of Nappa. Krillin pulls a Krillin by kicking Nappa square in the jaw. And yeah, that's totally pulling a Krillin because he nails him with the exact same kick he did in the Saiyan saga. A lot of these are references to the Saiyan saga, I'm noticing. Number 12. Sticking with the Krill Man himself, we arrive in episode 20, smack dab in the middle of the Resurrection F arc. You know, everyone's favorite. In this episode, Bulma attempts to gather the Z Warriors in preparation for the impending arrival of Frieza. And so, while chatting with Krillin, this happens. Do you hear that? If that sounds familiar, then you must be a One Piece fan. Or at least Krillin is, because that ringtone is a theme song from One Piece. Fun fact, the Japanese voice of Krillin is also the Japanese voice of Luffy from One Piece. Number 11. You know, Moscow was always the god of destruction I liked least. It could have been his doofy voice, can't wait for the English dub of that one, his weird arms, or maybe a combination of the two. I could never quite put my finger on why. Turns out Moscow is an amalgamation of a shitty GT character called Lute. Just look! He's taken his eyes, that stupid belly button plate thing. He has the exact same hands, pretty much everything down to the color is copied from this character. All this time I wondered why I didn't like Moscow, and it turns out it's because he looks like a fat guy in shitty GT cosplay. Number 10. With the commencement of episode 77, so too came the beginning of a brand new arc. We pick up with Goku, who by all accounts is doing great work actually. Cashing in on the crops he produced since the ending of the Future Trunks arc, he seems to be doing quite well for himself. However, on his way back from the market, he gets ambushed by some thugs looking to rob him. In response, Goku does this. Look familiar? Well, it should, because this exact same thing happened at the beginning of Dragon Ball Z with his brother Raditz. You know what they say? Like brother, like brother. That doesn't sound right. Number 9. Episode 30 wasn't exactly the most exciting episode to watch, but it did have a neat little Easter egg with Majin Buu and another Majin you might not be familiar with. You'll see while Goku, Krillin, and Vegeta are trying to convince Buu to join the team to fight Universe 6, Buu is reading a comic. And this isn't some random comic. It's one written and drawn by Akira Toriyama himself, entitled Nico Majin, a manga series produced between 1999 and 2005. Number 8. In Dragon Ball Z, when the mysterious Super Saiyan from the future, Trunks, arrived, it took many a Dragon Ball fan aback. Though when Goku arrived, he quickly took the wind out of his sails, as Goku tends to do. And if you thought things would be different in the Future Trunks arc of Dragon Ball Super, a whopping 216 episodes later, you'd be very, very wrong. Once Trunks arrives back in Goku's present timeline, in episode 49, he wants to test his strength. During the confrontation before Goku does this, Using only his fingers, he stops Trunks' blade right in its tracks, even smiling at him as if to say, "Ha, we've been here before, haven't we?" Number 7. Swinging right back from episode 49 to the very first episode of the series, we all remember Mr. Satan was trying to hand over 100 million Zenny to Goku as a thanks for doing all the work against Majin Buu. But what you might not have noticed was the illustration on the money in the case. You see that weird robot thing right there? That's not random. That's actually a drawing Akira Toriyama would use to depict himself in the manga series for Dragon Ball. He's plastered all over it. Good old Toribot. A really nice nod to the series creator. Number 6. Sometimes I'm faced with symbolism that I just can't ignore, and while this might be a bit of a stretch, I couldn't help myself but to include it all the same. Featured in episode 46, the finale of the short-lived filler story known as the Batafu arc, Vegeta is shown to be using a pacifier to stop his body from fading away as rapidly as it was. If you don't know the story, it's complicated, check it out, it's pretty cool. But those images of Vegeta with a pacifier, I can't help but think is a subtle nod to Baby from Dragon Ball GT. This one might be a bit out there, but I love it all the same. Number 5. Fast forward now to a more recent episode and we find ourselves in the middle of a clash between Ultra Instinct Goku and Kefla during the Tournament of Power in episode 116. Apart from being a fantastic fight from beginning to end, this episode also featured this moment. Blitzing forward to strike Goku, Kefla's blow misses entirely while Goku appears to have not moved a muscle. If this doesn't look familiar to you, it should, if you've seen Dragon Ball Z that is. Featured towards the end of episode 66 during the Namek saga, Goku is seen, or should I say not seen, dodging an attack from Raccoon, resulting in Raccoon regaining his balance in a very similar fashion to Kefla. This exchange is too similar to not be a callback at the very least to this moment. Number 4. From a later episode back to one of the earliest, we find ourselves in episode 2 of Super. Now, there's the obvious Vegeta keeping his promise to Trunks that he made back in Z I could do, but that's too easy, let's look at this one instead. Through the intentionally rough path Bulma took to the resort, Vegeta, atop the roof, finds himself looking a little disheveled to say the least. If you look specifically at what's in his hair, you'll notice 2 types of fruit commonly found in Japan. These 2 fruits being a durian and a zabin. These just so happen to be the 2 fruit that Zarbon and Dodoria were named after, 2 people Vegeta killed while on Namek. Number 3. The next 3 entries on this list are the most subtle and I love them all the more for it. Beginning with this reintroduction between 2 one-time foes, Android 17 and Piccolo in episode 94. I wouldn't be surprised if this flew under the radar for many viewers, it did for me. As Android 17 is approaching the Capsule Corp building, he stares down Piccolo who removes his headwear. In response to this, Android 17 begins to roll up his sleeve. This is mimicking the exact movements he made before they fought in episode 148 of Dragon Ball Z. It not only acts as a nice swerve for those in the audience that picked up on that, but also adds an extra level of psychology to the script, giving more reason as to why Android 17 looked bemused by Piccolo's peace offering extending his hand. Number 2. One thing fans might not have noticed about the ending to Resurrection F is how much it mimics the original fight that took place on Namek. Except for the ending, but we'll look past that. If we think back to the fight on Namek, we remember Vegeta being shot through the chest, being stomped on, laying in a heap looking for help, and Goku's arrival to lend a hand. In the Resurrection F fight, the exact same beats are hit in that order, but with the roles reversed. Goku gets shot through the chest, gets stomped on, is left in a heap looking for help, ultimately leading to Vegeta showing up to aid in the situation. This is a subtle inclusion that I didn't pick up on my first time viewing, but one that makes the scene all the better when you see the parallels. Now, before we move on to the number 1 spot, let's take a look at some honorable mentions. Number 1. I had to save my favorite for last. Episode 94 for many will be remembered as the episode that had the best Frieza transformation in the series, but for me it's special for another very subtle reason. While waiting for Fortune Teller Baba to return with Frieza from the otherworld, we the viewers see Goku for the first time in decades outside her place sparring, one would think, with no one. However, when put side by side, you can clearly see that he is reliving one of the last times he saw his grandpa Gohan. It's inclusions such as this that tells me Dragon Ball Super has some fantastic people working behind the scenes on the show, occasionally sprinkling it with tidbits of history and lore that we can all appreciate if we care to look. These were my favorite Easter eggs from Dragon Ball Super. Leave me know what yours were in the comments down below. Did I miss any? If you're new to this channel, I upload